completing your videographic from the KNON website. Welcome to the College of Complexes. Let us know if you'd like to see some more of these nice videos.
Well, welcome to College of Complexes. This is our 185th meeting since we started, which was 4 years ago. So it's been 4.5 years since we started. Actually, this started in Chicago in 1951 for the purpose of solving all the world's problems. They're still working at it. As I mentioned before, this is our 185th meeting. We put a speaker on every week. We give them an hour to make a presentation. If anybody interrupts the speaker during that time, we remind him that we listen only one fool at a time. That's one of our rules. You have to live up to that. And after that, we have questions and answers, not speeches, from the audience. And then we have remarks, rebuttals. Everybody in the audience that wants to gets 5 minutes to respond to what the speaker said for or against. Then our speaker gets to comment about the comments and close the meeting. So that's how we operate, and I think you all understand it. Anyway, before we announce our speaker, now is the time for announcements. So if you have any announcements, I see someone, his announcement here. Get up here and make your announcement. Susie.
So first of all, these microphones sound a little bit strange to me tonight. Can y'all tell that?
I hear you, Susie.
The microphones sound odd. Can we turn one of them off?
If you can blur sound, that's what it sounds like.
It's blurry, blurry, blurry. So it looks like we got a friendly crowd here tonight, for which I'm very, very grateful. So I'm going to make an announcement. Next weekend on Saturday from 8 to 5 at North Haven United Methodist Church, we are doing a Bit Hot. It is a bit hot in Texas right now, but Bit Hot is an abbreviation for Blue in the Heart of Texas, right? And it's come one, come all Democrats who are interested in helping with keeping Dallas County Democratic, as well as expanding that out and getting more representation from people who care about actual people as opposed to corporate personhood. My own little slant on that. I appreciate you if you're interested in that. I believe it's a $25 donation to the Dallas County Democratic Party. Does that sound a little bit better now, guys? Yes. Good, I'm glad. Whatever they're doing is working. So you guys come join us. Thanks.
We have someone else here. Judy, she's the secretary of the...
I'm Judy Bryant, and I'm the field organizer for Texas Alliance for Retired Americans, and I've been here with you a number of times. A number of us were at the Nuns on the Bus this afternoon. Would you help me pass those out? Yay! And also on July 2nd, here, Tom, would you pass these to your table? Leah, would you pass those around? As you know, there's a push in Congress to cut Social Security benefits even more, and the chain CPI would most definitely affect seniors and just keep going, being greater and greater and greater cuts. And so on Tuesday, July 2nd, the Texas Alliance for Retired Americans, we are doing the human chain against the chain CPI at Congressman Jeb Henserling's office on just up here on Abrams, because he has a 0% voting record for retiree issues out of 10 issues. He has almost a 0% lifetime record. He somehow got a 2%, but I don't even know, that was a fluke. But at any rate, it's a national day of action to oppose chain CPI and cuts to Social Security. And we would like for you to have any and all of you come out and join us. Bring kids. It's an intergenerational thing. We made we made chains here, Tom and Leah and myself and Marjorie and Susan. We made patriotic chains that are going to go between us because we're going to try briefly to circle the Comerica Bank building, there where his office is. We know we won't have but just literally minutes to do that, and then we'll have to adjourn to the sidewalk. But anyway, love to see you on July 2nd because it's a nationwide event. Yes, did you have a question? No. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay, who's next? Any other announcements? You have one, don't you? Okay.
Okay, these are flyers from the Arts District on what's coming up in the Arts District. They gave me about 10 cases of them to deliver, so if you want one or if you want a case, want to drop them off at like a cafe or something, it's just, I guess the Arts District is kind of having a quiet time right now and nobody's going, there's some really great shows coming up, so if you want to, we'll put them over here and I can get you a whole box if you want, please.
Any other announcements? Now's the time. Well, also on that literature table over there, besides what Erica just pointed out, there's a postcard thing from, it's the Newark Nuns on the Bus. They were here in Dallas this afternoon. They're on a trip going to San Francisco, and they have a postcard to send into your representative regarding immigration, that they want to get the immigration law passed. And Susie has them there, Nuns on the Bus, so it's something else to look at. Also, there's a poster, there's a brochure over there produced by the Alliance for Retired Americans that has a congressional voting record of the different congressmen in the area that you may be interested in. That's also on the table. Now, next week, we have Jim Love. He's going to, he's semi-retired, teaching math at a local. You're all welcome to be here to hear it. I have it on the paper, on the table there. I don't think you want to hear me talk about it. So it's there if you'd like to look at it for next week and pick it up. Jim Love will be our speaker. So, any more announcements? I guess that's it. Our speaker tonight is Rich Hancock. He is the 2012 Democratic nominee for Texas House District 102. He's a general manager of Rational Radio Broadcasting.com. He's the host of Rational Talk with Rich Hancock and a weekly contributor to WFAA's Inside Texas Politics. He's going to discuss voter registration, cultivation as the key to Democratic success in Texas. He will show that for over a decade, many pundits and consultants have encouraged Democratic candidates to cut to a GOP Lite to offset the system of moderate Republicans in state and local elections. Rick will argue that we are 99%, we are the 99%, and if more show up, we will win. So without further ado, please give a very warm welcome to Rick Hancock.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Tom Berry, first of all, as one of the Brotherhood of Failed Democratic Candidates for office here in Texas. Tom? Absolutely. And I've known Tom since 2004, when I met him when my old friend and former Senator John Kerry from Massachusetts was running for president. I cannot, however, discourage Tom from calling me Rick. My name is Rich Hancock. One day soon, he'll remember that. He might be on an IV by then, but he will remember it. As Tom mentioned, I was the Democratic nominee for House District 102 last year, and it was kind of interesting the way that came about. I was a weekly contributor to WFAA's Inside Texas Politics, where I did battle weekly with my old friend Mark Davis on the issues of the day, and that, in addition to my being with Rational Broadcasting and a few other things, led some folks up in Richardson, North Texas, to believe I would be a good candidate for office. So, I also, if you blink, you missed me on Prison Break here in Dallas too. So, fat guy on the sidewalk, that was me. No, I was the slovenly prison guard, but that's why no Emmy, no nothing. Don't worry about it. But when they came to me to ask me to run for State House against Stephanie Carter, James White, the president of the Far North Dallas Democrats, told me immediately, "Don't worry, you're not going to win anyway." Yeah. Now, you might think that a statement like that would make you think, well, run as who you are and try and be a good candidate and a good representative of the democratic ideals, democratic cause, but immediately following that declaration, prominent Democrats from Dallas to Austin to Washington, D.C. were discouraging me from running as a Democrat. I was told you can't be pro-union, you can't be pro-marriage equality, you can't be pro-choice vocally as a candidate in Texas. In fact, my campaign's media consulting firm, recommended to me by the House Democratic Campaign Committee, initially refused to use the word Democrat on my literature, yard signs, and stickers. After fighting with this group that was my consultant for over a month, they finally acquiesced, and it was Democrat Rich Hancock for Texas House. But the pressure to court moderate Republican voters continued long after that, and the reason is simple. Since so much of campaign fundraising when you're running for the legislature in Texas or running for anything in Texas relies on whether or not the major donors think you can win, they think you have to court the pool of existing voters. Herein lies the reason why I'm with you tonight. The simple fact is, Democrats are not going to change Republicans by pretending to be more Republican. I make an example with all due respect and love for Dallas attorney Greer Raggio, whose wife Lorraine was a judge, and Greer Raggio, a wonderful man who ran for Congress against Pete Sessions. In all the campaign literature that I saw from Greer Raggio's campaign, never once was the word Democrat mentioned. Whether this is an effective strategy or not is pretty well established. It is not. It doesn't win. Now that, by the same, in all fairness, that failure of strategy is well documented, but then again, so is mine. I lost, receiving 43% of the vote in the general election. I lost by about 7,500 votes. I don't think my opponent had better ideas than I did. I don't think my opponent was a better representative than I would have been. I think it was simply a matter of the mathematics of who shows up to vote. And that affects the mother's milk of politics. That affects the money. Texas wealthy Democratic donors gave tens of millions of dollars to the campaigns of high-profile candidacies around the country, like Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, Illinois Congresswoman Tammy Duckworth. But our Democratic U.S. Senate candidate, Paul Sadler, didn't even raise $1 million. for a U.S. Senate race in Texas. In his last run for the Texas House, the Texas legislature, he raised $1.5 million. Running for U.S. Senate in Texas in 2012. I'm sorry, am I interrupting you? Dude. Last year, running for U.S. Senate in 2012, Paul Sadler raised about $800,000. And this is a very admirable guy, a statesman, someone who's well regarded. The fact is, if they don't think you can win, they don't want to give you money. And they don't think you're going to win if you act like a real Democrat. So, why is it a given that Democrats can't win in Texas? Everybody in this room knows that by the last 15 years. Look at the failed gubernatorial candidacies of Tony Sanchez, Chris Bell, Bill White. You can blame anti-Latino fear-mongering from the right, which so effectively motivates the older white voters in Texas to show up on Election Day. But the fact is that voter suppression efforts have been wildly successful. Case in point, 2011, the legislature passes a photo voter ID bill, a photo voter ID law. We all know this, right? You have to have a state-issued photo identification to go and cast a vote. We all know that that law was never implemented because Texas requires pre-clearance based on Article 5 of the Civil Rights Act, and that clearance was never issued. It has to be cleared through the Justice Department or the D.C. District Court. It didn't do it. But the fact is, this didn't stop the Republican Secretary of State in Texas from issuing, insisting that flyers be distributed at the polls on Election Day in 2011, saying that you wouldn't be allowed to vote next time without a photo ID. They knew full well that this was under adjudication, and that is called voter suppression. That is called fear-mongering. Now, the most recent legislative redistricting continues to be challenged. We have friends from, my friend Erica was at the redistricting discussions the other day. We know that we don't have fair minority representation as a result of the last round of redistricting. Former House Majority Leader and convicted felon Tom DeLay in 2003 gerrymandered the districts so that Republicans would have what they were looking for. It was a group called Texans for a Permanent Majority. That's what they were hoping to do. That's why Tom DeLay in 2003, not waiting till the next census, but waiting for the political opportunity, redistricted us, the Democrats, practically out of existence. So the vast majority of Texas executive and legislative branch decision makers appear less than anxious to expand the pool of voters to include more potential Democrats. I give you as example a piece called The Opinionator from the New York Times. This is dated May 15th of this year, called Targeting Texas by Thomas Edsall, wherein in addition to other things he says, while the Republican Party nationally struggles to resolve fratricidal conflict over gay marriage and immigration reform, there's yet another elephant in the room. Texas, the last big state bastion of the right. Neglected by national Democrats since 1992, when Bill Clinton's campaign decided to write it off, Texas has emerged as a prime target for partisan realignment. Now we get to the folks from Battleground, Texas. Who here in this room hasn't heard of Battleground, Texas? Jeremy Byrd, Jen Brown, two folks from the Organizing for America, the Barack Obama ground game, decided to try and bring the Democratic Party back in Texas. Byrd and Brown have put together an independent expenditure committee called Battleground Texas to combine advances in high-tech micro-targeting and digital communication with the volunteer mobilization that characterized Obama's 2008 and 2012 presidential campaigns. Texas Attorney General Greg Abbott compared the efforts of Battleground Texas, or in fact, equated them as a greater threat than a nuclear North Korea. I'm not joking. Greg Abbott, quote unquote, "One thing that requires ongoing vigilance is the reality that the state of Texas is coming under a new assault, an assault far more dangerous than that what the leader of North Korea threatened when he said he was going to add Austin, Texas as one of the recipients of his nuclear weapons." Greg Abbott, Attorney General Greg Abbott, the most litigious anti-lawsuit Attorney General in history, and the validity of his argument notwithstanding, this is exactly shows how real the threat is to this permanent Republican majority in Texas. The only solution for you and I, given problems with redistricting, given problems with the gerrymandering that's gone on, is to get more people to the polls. And Texas voter participation is an outrage. Texas is 47th in the United States, 50 states, in eligible voter population participation. 47th out of 50. In 2000, 92% of Travis County's eligible voters were registered to vote. 92% in 2000. In 2012, 72% of eligible voters participated. So why do Republicans like Greg Abbott regard voter registration as proposed by Battleground Texas to be this kind of a threat? Because the Texas Republican Party relies, and not just the Texas Republican Party, but Republican success relies upon low voter turnout. It ensures their success. This is not an opinion. This is observable, verifiable fact. Paul Weyrich, the co-founder of the Heritage Foundation, declared as much when he cynically referred to expanding voter participation and civic involvement as the goo-goo syndrome. The goo-goo syndrome is the good government syndrome. How lovely that Paul Weyrich apparently sneers at the notion of good government. It's like calling people do-gooders and sneering at them while you do it. He declared that the majority of the American people have never decided who leads, who legislates, or who participates in this country. The majority has never decided what the majority should have, and that they never should and never will. You can call it plutocracy, you can call it oligarchy by design, but it's the same old story that created the need for the Voting Rights Act, under which we have protection today. The simple reason for the Voting Rights Act was that people were being forced out of participating in the system. Some people, no matter how legitimate their citizenship or their legal status, should not be encouraged to vote. I simply refer to it as the politics of the worthy. See, there are all kinds of political entitlements. We all know this. Whether it's a welfare mother getting food stamps or an oil company getting subsidies, people regard those differently because they look at the worthiness of the recipient. Halliburton's not a bad company. Halliburton deserves all the no-bid contracts they get because they're worthy of them. But women with infant children don't deserve to have milk for their kids. That's the politics of the worthy. Back to the piece by Thomas Edsel. He goes on to say, Texas 38 votes in the Electoral College are the last line of defense. This is Greg Abbott. The last line of defense for those who want to protect America's future. Robert Stein, who's a political scientist at Rice University, said, however, that Texas is ripe for realignment because whites are already a minority in the state population, 44.8%. That's down from 52.4% in 2000. Blacks remain around 12.2%. Hispanics are at 38.1%. That's up from 32% in 2000. Asian Americans, Native Americans, others make up the remaining 4.9%. Whites are teetering at just over 50% of Texas eligible voters. That would make sense in terms of the Republican success at the polls. Hispanic turnout in Texas, however, is strikingly low by comparison. You hear people talk about how Hispanic participation in elections is traditionally low. Well, by comparison to other states, Texas Hispanic voter turnout is around 38.8%. That's compared with 48% national. Now, some simple calculations show what Hispanic mobilization could mean in Texas. Raising turnout levels by 9.2%, that would be to the national level of 48, and registration up by 3.2% would have an increased number of Texas Latino voters in 2012 of 329,000 voters. Just as a very selfish exercise, I would have loved to have 8,000 of those votes. I'd be a legislator now and not standing here talking to you guys and able to dress casually. But a lot of times it is the fear of that expanded participation among the Latino population that is the problem. You hear people talk about, obviously, the idea that someone's coming to take your job. They're illegal and they shouldn't be here and they should all be sent back. You know, that's simply not going to happen. And the fact that so many of them who are here and not participating makes me wonder why that is. Well, one answer to the problem of Hispanic participation in the elections might have to do with what we all have in common, and that's our kids in school. In just 15 years, from 2010 to 2025, the percentage of eligible white voters will drop by 22%. This is natural attrition. These are folks who are going to be passing on. Hispanics will be a plurality of eligible voters in Texas by 2025. The front line of the battle for who is going to make decisions on our behalf is who has kids in school. Who has kids? Well, that's right. I have a 9-year-old daughter in the public school in Richardson. We have kids in school, and in 2011, the Texas legislature slashed public education spending by $5.4 billion. We knew we had more than $5 billion in the rainy day fund, and Texas Governor Rick Perry said, that's not for you. That's not for your kids. That's not for your kids. We need that for something else. Now, we're looking at the legislature when the rainy day fund is flush. We got all kinds of new business coming in. We got revenues up. They're still telling us, well, we might be able to give you back about $4 billion of that for your schools. Hispanics account for over half of the children in Texas public schools. Schools whose funding was slashed, as I said. Texas has the largest number of uninsured people in the country, with Latinos constituting the majority of that uninsured population. Fully 1/4 of people in Texas have no health insurance. 30% of women in Texas have no health insurance. So the pushback against Governor Perry's refusal to expand Medicaid coverage with the federal money that will come with it is also a no-brainer for a lot of people who see these entitlements as exactly what they were intended to be. Not a handout for freeloaders, but an entitlement of your citizenship. You know, we don't only call in the preamble to the Constitution, we don't only call for providing for the common defense, but promoting the general welfare and securing the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. That's in the preamble. And it's just like the Second Amendment, you know, don't give me half sentences. In any case, Battleground Texas has a ground game that we were lacking in 2012 here in this state. A ground game that is going to mean more than anything else voter registration and cultivation. Register people to vote and let them know what their participation can mean to themselves, to their kids, to their jobs, to their homes, to their economy, to their future. Ryan Lizza, who writes for The New Yorker, said, in not too many years, Texas could switch from being all Republican to all Democrat. If that happens, no Republican will ever again win the White House. New York and California are for the foreseeable future unalterably Democratic. If Texas turns bright blue, the Electoral College math is simple. The Republican Party would cease to exist. They would become like the... I'm not preaching to the choir with you, brother, I can tell. They would become, in historical terms, like the Whig Party. Our kids and grandkids would study how they used to put up national presidential candidates that have conventions, but they don't exist anymore. Well, I would suggest to you, where that got an enthusiastic round of applause, the simple fact is, it's not going to happen on its own. Battleground Texas and you and I need to be in this together. We have to participate. Now, my friend Kim Morris is here. She is Executive Director of the Dallas County Democratic Party. You can get involved with Battleground Texas. Yes, please. You can get involved with Battleground Texas through Kim's office. You can become a deputy registrar, as I did again this year. I'm a deputy registrar of voters. You can go out to talk to folks at your local strip mall and say, hey, can I put up a table here? I'm not running for office. I'm not doing just Democrat or Republican. I want to register everybody to vote. I'll never understand the logic of folks who want the fewest among us to make all the decisions for us. You know, in the citizenship test that folks like my friend from KNON, Tunde Obazi, took, he is originally from Nigeria. He's the most knowledgeable person about American history that I know, and he's been a U.S. citizen for a couple of years. There's a question: what is the most important right afforded you by the Constitution? The right to vote. Because without the right to vote, none of your other rights matter. In participatory democratic republic, that's why we're all here. I thank you so much for your kind attention.
Who has any questions? Now is the time. Yeah, oh, you got it. Here it is.
I remember you. How are you?
Who wants to be first? Has to be a first. Who wants to be first? I can't believe this. Nobody wants to be first. Who wants to be second? Somebody wants to be first.
Hey, Rich, what are some of the statistics from the last 2012 on what the statistics were for the election? Can you give us some percentage of minority votes or Democrats or who voted?
Well, actually, in 2012, I don't have specific statistical information by demographic breakdown, but a lot of folks remember that throughout most of last year, a lot of the pundits on Fox News were saying, well, this is why Mitt Romney's going to win, because the students are all disenfranchised with Obama and they're not going to come out and vote for him. And women are mad at him because he hasn't done this and that. And Hispanics are mad at him because he hasn't passed immigration reform. And what did we see as a result of the work of Jeremy Byrd and Jen Brown? We saw increases from 2008 to 2012 for Obama among young people, women, and Latinos. So that's an indication of the wisdom of the strategy to go out and do it. This was a presidential campaign that did a vast and very high-tech grassroots campaign to get people out to vote. Yes, sir.
I have two questions. The first
Sure.
one is, what can we do to, first of all, make Democrats more aggressive on wedge issues now? because the Republicans in the past have been extremely aggressive and very effective with wedge issues, and now they've opened themselves up on issues, just to name off the top of my head: immigration, gun control, healthcare, education, and the environment. That's 5 right there. It's almost political malpractice not to be effective in wedging voters away from Republicans in those issues.
I completely agree with you, but there's another side to that coin, and that would be that in 2010, the Republicans, and specifically the Tea Party manifestation of the Republicans, so successfully used their wedge issues. Think about the difference between the numbers, the positive numbers with respect to marriage equality between 2010 and 2012 and 2013, immigration 2012 to 2013. I remember in 2006, Ted Kennedy and John McCain very successfully shepherded a very forward-thinking immigration reform policy through the Senate. George W. Bush wanted to sign it, and the Republicans in the Senate killed it. So they were so sure in 2006 that immigration reform was always going to be pure poison that they killed it. Now, less than 10 years later, you've got people clamoring for immigration reform. In fact, you've got the Texas Republican Party and Arizona Republican Party and New Mexico. These states are desperate to get Latino voters into their fold because they know they're going to be the ones deciding elections in a few very short years. So the flip side to wedge issues, first of all, ideologically, I completely agree with you. I feel like I ran a campaign for myself last year where I didn't hedge on the issues that I believed in strongly, but a good example of the best strategy for success in politics, at least nationally, is moderation. For all the Republicans who want to tell you what a radical lunatic Barack Obama is, in every tangible sense, Barack Obama is and always has been a very moderate political figure. And with the exception of his almost, lonely opposition to the Iraq War as a state senator in Illinois back in 2004, he's always been very moderate. His presidency has been very moderate. So the wedge issues, I say, if it's you stand your ground. I wouldn't move an inch on marriage equality, but I mean, I admit to being as selfish as Dick Cheney on this, or Republicans who have. I have a younger brother who is a veteran of the first Iraq War, who is a Boston police officer, a member of the SWAT team that got the guys who set off the Boston Marathon bomb, and he happens also to be gay. He was the first openly gay recruit to the Boston Police Academy. So when it comes to marriage equality, I have some, I kind of have some skin in the game there. This is a member of my family who I want to fight for. But with the issues that you talk about, we have clear and distinct differences from Republicans when we campaign. But well, run down your list for me again. Let's.
Well, what I meant was the aggression at which we use them. It's not because we're almost kind of using a Buddhist approach, whereas we just sort of let the issues take care of themselves. But the issues, by the way, were immigration, which most people are for. Surely most people acknowledge that has to be reformed. Sure. And it looks like that's going to fail. Gun control, that has failed. Yeah. And 90% support that. Why is that failing? Healthcare, everybody acknowledges that there are problems with our system, but yet it barely passed.
And in fact,
education and environment, more local issues, I suppose, there.
To go further with healthcare, or the talk about time wasting in the Congress, the Republicans continue. They have voted 37 times to overturn Obamacare. 39? Oh, I'm sorry, I took a nap, I missed 2. 39 times to overturn the law of the land that's been ratified by the Supreme Court, but they'll keep on voting to overturn Obamacare because they actually think this is something that's going to get them votes in 2014. To your point, I completely agree with you, and we should be using the gun control issue and the immigration issues as a cudgel against these guys in 2014. Absolutely. But then I'm an angry old liberal. So.
The other question was, what do you propose we do to actualize contenders across the ballot in this state? I mean, you notwithstanding, but I mean, there's so many that are uncontested or that are practically uncontested because they're in such gerrymandered districts that even at first glance, you can tell the Democrat doesn't have a chance because he just doesn't have the charisma that the Republican does. So just in that respect, just at face value, how can we get candidates that are competent?
The best thing I could suggest is offer them money. That's not even a joke. I actually did, there's a piece that I have on YouTube that's on the internet you can take a look at, which is called The Worst Job in Politics. The Texas legislature is simply the worst job in politics because you're paid a pittance to do it, it costs a fortune to win it, and the burdens on your home life, on your family life, on your career are immeasurable. You earn $7,200 a year to be in the Texas legislature. That is less than $15,000 a year, $15,000 a term every 2 years, and that's below the U.S. poverty level. How are you? What is the benefit? Someone please, and I'm asking sincerely of anyone who feels this way. What is the actual benefit of a part-time legislature? Part-time legislators have full-time jobs in fields like whether they're lawyers or they're business owners or whatever. There are going to be issues that come across their desk, particularly in the state of Texas, where, you know, if you're a lawyer and you're representing someone who has a client who has a particular interest, and that interest might conflict with what you're voting on in the legislature, you face no repercussions for that kind of an issue where you should recuse yourself. That's bad government. You know, there are places where if a lobbyist or someone with a particular interest before the legislature buys you a ham sandwich, you've broken a state law, and it's a felony violation. You can go to jail for it. But, not saying there was anything untoward about this, but, for example, my opponent, when in the race for the legislature, received a contribution from one individual of $80,000. $80,000 from one guy. The donor was home builder Bob Perry. And, you know, it might be, I just think you're wonderful, have $80,000. You know, I think there are some folks in the room old enough to remember Watergate, old enough to remember the realities of why there were campaign finance reform efforts in this country in the first place. Because you follow the money. When bad things happen, follow the money, because the money takes you back to where the crime began. The simple fact is, money and politics are inextricably linked, but that doesn't mean you can't know why someone is doing what they're doing. This whole thing with the Tea Party groups and the 501c4s with the IRS that's being bandied about now. Someone, again, I welcome the response. Someone give me one good reason why someone should be able to contribute money to an overtly political group, and I don't deserve to know about it. When by the same token, if you give money to the campaign to elect Tom Berry, your name's on a list of donors. Why shouldn't you be identified if you are a contributor to one of these, to the Tea Party, to Americans for Prosperity, to Think Progress, to Name Democracy Now, to People for the American Way? If you give money to those people, we should know that you gave money to them. A, It's a tax-deductible donation, so it's part of your tax record anyway. And B, you are influencing politics in this country. Charles and David Koch have made a lot of hay. And this is, again, getting back to the Tea Party thing. 2010, or actually 2009, this movement came about from out of nowhere. From the ether, suddenly there was the Tea Party. I was in South Lake, Texas, and I hope I won't offend anyone with my language right now, but I was in South Lake, Texas for the Tax Day Tea Party rally in 2009. I was doing the morning show on Rational Radio at the time, and I went out to see what was going to happen out there. And there were some Democrats who were at the back of the crowd, quiet, just holding signs that essentially said, "We support the president." And in my 2 hours in South Lake, I was called a communist, a baby killer, a Nazi, a faggot, more times than in the entirety of my political life. And I worked for Ted Kennedy. So this was a shocking 2 hours of my life. This visceral political manifestation came from out of nowhere. But it didn't come from out of nowhere without bank. We know that Dick Armey, former House Majority Leader, lives out in Fort Worth, was the director of Freedom Works. Freedom Works getting its money from the Koch brothers, the Americans for Prosperity. The Tea Party was very well financed. Does someone actually believe that we don't deserve to know where the Tea Party groups got their money? Really?
I have a quick question.
Think so? Yes.
Sorry, I've got the mic. I'll bring it over to when you're done. When I'm done. Quick question. Isn't statistically the women voter turnout is also much lower than the male voter turnout? And what are the statistics on that in Texas? And what can we do to increase women's voter turnout? Because that would help the Democratic Party.
Percentage of women participation in elections is going up as women in the workplace and women's empowerment as primary breadwinners in households has been going up. That's what can you do about getting more women involved? I don't know. I got women telling me what to do all day. I don't know too many women who aren't. Their bosses won't let them take off work to go vote? Why don't we vote on Saturday in this country? Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay. Koch brothers. Give us the equivalence of what George Soros and Mayor Bromberg do.
Okay. The equivalency between the Koch brothers and on the right and billionaire financier and philanthropist George Soros and New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg is Bloomberg has close to the same money as the Koch brothers, whose the Koch Industries is the largest private untraded corporation in this country. The Koch brothers' personal wealth exceeds $50 billion. George Soros' wealth, I think, exceeds $1 billion. The level of influence, the disparity between the Koch brothers and George Soros, unless, of course, you listen to and believe Glenn Beck, in which case all I have to say is, no, really. Glenn Beck's gone so far out where the trains don't run that it's impossible for him to return. But his belief that George Soros has influenced American politics the way the Koch brothers have is preposterous. First of all, the Koch family influence on American politics goes back to the father, who was a founding member of the John Birch Society. That's not I'm not making that up. The Koch's dad was the John Birch Society, which, if I'm not mistaken, kind of was run out of town on a rail for their racism and sexism and lunacy back in the 50s and 60s.
So can you attribute that to them?
I attribute that to who?
To the two sons.
No, I attribute those.
So why say it?
I attribute those ideals to the sons. Yes, the sons' ideals are very similar to those
libertarians.
of the father. They're not libertarians, they're totalitarians. The Koch brothers are totalitarians. They're authoritarians. They're not libertarian. What's libertarian about the Koch brothers? They want to tell you exactly what to do with your ass all day long, every day, but they don't want anybody to bother them. Freedom and liberty for everyone, except anyone who's having sex with someone I don't want them to, or having babies I don't want them to. Freedom and liberty for everyone, except who I don't want to have it. That's not libertarian. That's right.
Well, that's what all the national publications label them as, so you're in direct opposition to the majority of the United States in that regard.
Okay, well then...
What's the difference then what's the difference between their 501c4 and President Obama's 501c4 that he set up and used during the election?
Okay, the difference between the two is that the president's, which is called USA Priorities, what the heck was it called again? USA Priority Action or something like that. I can't remember what it was called. But the difference is that was set up on behalf of, as outside of the campaign, on behalf of the president's ideals, the same way Mitt Romney's was, the same way Newt Gingrich's was. The difference between Americans for Prosperity and the Tea Party groups is they want to pretend they're not political. The president's group didn't pretend to not be political. Neither did Mitt Romney's or Newt Gingrich's or Rick Santorum's or Herman Cain's. Don't tell me you're not political when you're adversely influencing my country.
The law says that a 501c4 can not spend more than 50% of their contributions on the direct political objectives of a party.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't matter whether Soros or Koch or Bloomberg or anybody else puts the money in there. If they raise it, I mean, they can only put $1 in it and raise $100 million. And so then they can go spend money, but they can't spend more than 50%, or they're disqualified as a political, as a 501c4. They're not eligible to do that.
Yeah, well, and listen, we're arguing about the legitimacy of groups that were made possible by the Citizens United decision of the Supreme Court. And I'm one of those who is strongly in favor of overturning that decision, not through appeals to the court, but by the means we have at our disposal, which would be another constitutional amendment saying, guess what? This is what a person is. It's not a corporation. A corporation was never mentioned in the original document of the Constitution. It was never mentioned anywhere in the Constitution until debate over the 14th Amendment, where it affected the railroad corporations, and a clerk inserted his own opinion that corporations were people into a judgment. So the corporations, I don't disagree with you about the way, and in the vernacular that my dad used to say, we're kind of picking that shit out of pepper here when we're talking about which 501c4s are better. As you can tell, I'm not running for anything now. Does anyone notice that? Yeah.
Well, my parting comment would be, from what I've read and see, and I'm an independent. I'm not a registered Republican. I'm not a registered Democrat. I'm not a registered Libertarian. None of the above. But my observation is that people on the right and people on the left use a lot of the vehicles to do a lot of the same things. And I listen to the speeches, and when people on the left talk, all they do is slam the ones on the right. And when people on the right talk, all they do is slam people on the left. So we don't get a very balanced approach unless there's somebody who raises the points, and that's all I'm doing.
Sure, and I don't disagree with them. And I first of all, and sir, I genuinely appreciate your points. I would say that as a unabashed, proud, lifelong, liberal Democrat, I have my opinions and my ideas. And my opinions and my ideas don't make me a communist, and they don't make me un-American, and they don't make me immoral. But people on the other side, when you talk about where you get your opinions from, let me just give one example. Talk show host Mark Davis from formerly WBAP, he's now on 660 AM, is a very, very dear friend of mine. He and I did Inside Texas Politics together for 3 years.
I hear you guys talk with each other.
He and I, well, I love him like family. We're very dear friends. But see, the difference between the way Mark and I talk about politics and the way some of these, like the debate up in South Lake after the Tea Party rally, was they think I'm evil because I disagree with them. And you know, when you, this all lends itself to the reality of the political polarization and extremism that's going on. I am a liberal Democrat, but in many ways, realistically, I'm very conservative. I live a very conservative lifestyle. I am a homeowner, I'm a parent, I'm a PTA dad, I'm a softball coach. Being a liberal politically doesn't make me immoral or evil, unless you talk to someone who says that anybody who's liberal is immoral and evil. That's my point. Extremism is, and to paraphrase Barry Goldwater in all due respect, extremism in the defense of anything is a vice. Extremism in the defense of anything is a vice.
First of all, thank you. I've enjoyed it. Do you have a strategy? We have registered voters before. Do you have a strategy to, first of all, people that walk by and say, well, my vote won't count anyway? I mean, we were not registering anyone to be either Democrat or Republican, just to vote. But we had people say, well, I'm not going to register because my vote doesn't count. Do you have an answer for that?
Absolutely, and God bless you for your question. I would say to anyone who thinks that their vote doesn't matter, if you were alive in the year 2000, you know what a matter of a couple of hundred votes in a couple of counties in Florida meant in 2000. A few hundred votes settled the presidential election in this country in 2000. And if that doesn't show that every vote counts, I don't know what does. I've been waiting for you.
I always give the European view. Because in Europe, we regard the Democrats and the Republican Party as two right-wing parties, actually. There is no party which supports the average American, in our humble view. Now, the question I have for you is, yes, you said that Obama was a moderate. Well, most people voting for Obama, which was a surprise victory, really voted for a change. I think most people recognize this country has to have a major change, and yet nothing has happened. Not to Wall Street, not to corporations, not to nothing. The healthcare deal was a sellout to the insurance companies, and won't answer the bill. So the question I have for you is, why is it that the average Democrat is so scared to stand up and really speak the truth to the people? Look, this is a situation, the people actually are more intelligent, they do understand, and yet these characters in Washington just are unable to tell it like it is, I think. So, why is it? Why don't they have the guts to face down these people? I mean, I'm amazed, actually, because this country is in terrible trouble.
I told you that's why I was waiting for him. Please give him a round of applause. That was excellent. Sir, I actually agree with absolutely everything you said. And I would suggest that the changes that have occurred, now here's the funny thing, and as someone who looks at this from a European perspective, you can understand this because this was what happened, what I saw January 20th, 2009. Some people on the political right actually, and you know this from watching, and listening to Fox News and stuff, actually sincerely believe that all their rights have been taken away. What changed on January 21st, 2009? As my friend just said, virtually nothing. All of your rights have not been taken away, but that's the belief of some on the extreme right. Then on the extreme left, you have people, I'll give you an example, someone who I like and admire and disagree with on many things is Gold Star mom and peace activist Cindy Sheehan. I've met with her many times. When I was in radio, I had her on my show many times. And when Cindy Sheehan says, George W. Bush and Barack Obama are exactly the same, she's as wrong as the guy on the right who says suddenly the day Obama took office, all of his rights went away. As wrong as the NRA, who think that the jackbooted stormtroopers of the government are coming to take away all their guns. No one seems to want to remember that this guy, who was a constitutional law professor, is very well documented in his writings in support of the Second Amendment to the Constitution. But that's not good politics. That doesn't drive the wedge in between people. So the simple fact is, I think that the health care law was too accommodating to the insurance industry, but that was the concession we could get. We couldn't get single payer. We couldn't get it. That was the concession we could get. And we barely got it. If Democrats in this room remember, Senator Max Baucus, chair of the Finance Committee, Democrat, very nearly killed the health care bill in the Senate. So the health care bill was a tiny step. But those people who remember history will remember that in Social Security in the 1930s initially was a tiny step. These things happen incrementally. And I would suggest from a political standpoint, because if nothing else, I think I'm a political realist, Barack Obama faces real restrictions on what he can do without appearing extreme or radical. Whether that's his true nature or not, he can only take small steps because big steps look like, well, I mean, look at the small steps he's taken, and they say, aha, look, he did this. He had cornflakes. He's a socialist. He had cornflakes this morning. No Raisin Bran, you socialist. The umbrella, he had a military officer, a man in uniform was holding an umbrella over his head. All the humanity. Where is Richard Nixon when we need him? For me, exactly where I want him. But that notwithstanding, the fact is, these things, these little tempests in a teacup, I don't mention this as a nothing thing. This is very serious. What happened in Benghazi was terrible. But why all of a sudden are all the people who were George W. Bush's faithful raising such a fuss over diplomatic security in Benghazi when they were absent in the 50 previous instances of diplomatic security breaches all around the world under George Bush? Well, yeah, that's a very good point. They don't want Hillary to run. But, I'm sorry, did anybody else have a question? Yes, sir.
Yeah, there was a point made earlier about libertarianism, and it's just 2 points I just wanted to bring forth, or question rather. From what I understand, I mean, it looks like you have a lot of different types of conservatives that have kind of created this so-called libertarian movement in the Tea Party, but like evangelicals and true libertarians, there's just a lot of, they're in bed together, but I don't think it's a true alliance. They just all hate Obama. Yeah. But where do you see the Tea Party going, say, after this second term of Obama?
My short answer would be away. Going away would be nice if it... the Tea Party, let's just be realistic for a second. The Tea Party was a direct manifestation of a change in marketing in the Republican Party. By the way, don't anyone for a second pretend that the Republican Party and the Tea Party are not exactly the same. 39 federal candidates for elective office running in 2010, every single one of them was a Republican. That doesn't mean that the Tea Party is diverse. If they have some members who used to be Democrats, you know, that doesn't make them Democrats. That makes them neocons. Neocons, not libertarians, not by a stretch. People who want to get into everybody's bedroom are not libertarians. It's that simple. Libertarians, the simple definition that I heard Bill Maher use years ago was libertarians who want to smoke pot and get laid. So they are not, the Tea Party is not libertarian. The Tea Party is a rebranding of Republican after the decimation at the polls in 2008. Remember, the Republicans lost the House, they lost the Senate, and they lost the presidency. And the next day, rebranding of the Republican Party started, and that was the Tea Party.
What can we do about how things are done within the Congress, within the House and the Senate in terms of, you know, wasting our taxpayer money by having this health care law heard in opposition for the 39th time?
I hate to sound flippant, but we can pay attention, and that's one thing that we don't do with respect to the Congress. You know, one thing I love about the British House of Commons and the way the British debate the whole thing out in the open. I mean, I love watching the fighting in the British House of Commons because they're getting it. And if someone's ignoring the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister gets an earful of it standing at the lectern the next day. I love that. I don't want that same system, but in terms of transparency, I want the ability to filibuster to be amended so that it is back to an actual filibuster. You want to filibuster? Stand on the floor of the chamber and filibuster like you were supposed to. So that's one thing in the House of Representatives. I wish I vote them out. That's you know, that's all I can tell you. The House is going to be in play in 2014. There's really precious little else we can do. You know, back to my point, the most important right you have is afforded by your Constitution is to vote, and we don't use it enough. That's why I came to talk to you tonight. We can get more of us participating if more of us actually have some skin in the game. And that's why if you're registered, if you're informed, then you'll frankly, you'll give a crap, and you'll show up and vote.
Well, it sounds like you've interviewed quite a few people in your career. So one thing that I always get frustrated, I watch a lot of the shows. I always get frustrated. Our politicians are sitting on the shows, lying through their teeth, and the media is like, oh, okay, fine, whatever. They don't even call them on it. So what do you think, you know, we can do to kind of push for that? Or what is there a way to change the perspective? Because if the people interviewing are allowing them to lie, we're going to believe their lies, and then we're going to vote against our better interests. How can we fix that?
That's a great question about how we hold people in power to account for what they say and do. Is anyone here familiar with the new Aaron Sorkin program called The Newsroom? The Newsroom? The Newsroom is all about a cable news show with an anchor named Will McAvoy who has this epiphany that suddenly, after years of being what they call the Jay Leno of news talk shows, he just wants everybody to like him. He decides he's going to get up all in everybody's grill and he's going to ask the tough questions and he's going to hold their feet to the fire. As someone who has been a broadcast journalist for over 25 years, I can tell you, here's the simple fact of again, pardon me, you can tell I'm not running for office, of calling bullshit on somebody when they're sitting in a chair across from you. They never come back and talk to you again. Most of the people in the corporatized public broadcast industry are in the business of not making you angry. They want you to sit and enjoy the pablum they feed you and not change the channel. The difference between CNN International and CNN USA is astonishing. I don't care about Honey Boo Boo. I don't care about the size of Kim Kardashian's backside. I don't care about, but this is the news we are fed all day. And the fact is that when you hold someone to the line on someone, and I'll give a couple of examples of people doing a wonderful job of it. Piers Morgan is doing a good job of it. Martin Bashir is doing a good job of it. Rachel Maddow does a good job of it. Some people do a good job of... Brett Baer isn't terrible. On Fox News, Brett Baer isn't terrible. What's the other guy? Shepard Smith isn't terrible. There are some good conservative and liberal journalists, and their politics shines through, Cronkite's did. Edward R. Murrow's did. They're people. They're smart people. Of course they have opinions about stuff. When suddenly did someone say, you know what? If they're telling us the news, we can't know what they think about anything. That's idiotic. Every one of those people is educated, worldly, and informed, and I want to know what educated, worldly, informed people think. I don't know about you, but I do. So what can we do about bad TV interviews with bad politicians? Write a letter to them and say, ask a damn question, will you? Yes, ma'am.
With all the things that you've said and all the things that we all agree on, what is your best suggestion, and maybe some of the other folks here that have been Democratic Party officials and various things, because we have to have a firm plan for everybody who is committed to turning this state purple and then blue to come out swinging, more or less. We cannot sit by and wait for them to come out first. We have to have a set of things to say and do and ways to be in a nice way.
Yep.
But we must be aggressive and not let people, as you said, make other folks think that because you don't agree with them and you don't agree with their way of doing it, you're un-American, you're, like you said, you know, immoral or whatever. I'm tired of making of people thinking they can call other Americans out like that.
Yeah.
And I think we've sat back a little bit because the Tea Party took everybody, caught everybody off guard a bit with the way that they do things. And we need to learn to be aggressive and firm. That doesn't mean be ugly. But I mean, I just like some ideas, because we're voter registrars. We go out with the Texas Alliance for Retired Americans to, you know, to senior citizen centers, nursing homes, all those kinds of things, registering voters, doing things. But when we're actually working for when we're taking that hat off and working for our Democratic candidates,
yep.
What can we do? Because we have to have a plan, and we have to know about it now. And I think that's what I think that's what I'm looking for, because I want to know what I can do.
Right. Well, you make a good point, and that is the reason after I lost my run for the legislature last year, I went right back to the executive committee. I became a precinct chair again, and I became a deputy voter registrar, because I want to be able to register people to vote when they tell me, oh, no, I don't vote, and I can convince them they should. Give them a compelling argument. I'll tell you what, the two ends of the spectrum, what you say to, you know, what I say to older people who don't participate, and what I say to younger people who don't participate. Older citizens who don't participate, I ask them the simplest question: do you love your kids? Do you love your grandkids? Do you care what you leave them? Do you care what kind of America you leave your progeny? Someone's going to do the job that's on the ballot. Someone's going to do that job. And if you don't participate in who it is that does that job, then you have shirked your responsibility as a citizen. My dad used to say to me, if you think all politicians are lepers, your job is to pick the one with the most fingers. Your job is to pick someone to do that job, because that's your responsibility. And they don't need to be down from the mountaintop from Valhalla, these hallowed figures. They're just applying for a job from you. Pick the best one and vote them into office. But to young people, and I go to the Dallas campus of UT Dallas campus with regularity, talk to the Democratic group there, talk to Richland College kids, and young people who are invested in the process. I say to them, okay, you're in college, you're paying for your education. Do you realize that 30 years ago, my friend Walter Hoffhines, who ran for Congress, told me this. 30 years ago, late 1970s, a 1 year at University of Texas Law School, UT Law School, cost $600. That's not ancient history. That's not turn of the last century. That's 30 years ago. The cost of a public education has gone up over 600 times in 30 years. Why? Has it gotten that much better? Do football uniforms cost that much more? Really? Does the band need high-tech equipment? No. It's gone up because they have been allowed to raise the price of an education. Because the loan system has created an opportunism in the banking industry to say, we'll guarantee your student loans. You should ask for more for them for tuition. This has gone on for 30 years. The cost of a college education, and I hate to invoke the right-wing deity, but when Ronald Reagan was governor of California, the public college system was free. Before he left, it was still very affordable, but it was no longer free. Now a college education from UCLA or from UC Berkeley or from UC Irvine, name a school in the University of California system, is a bloody fortune. And if you're from out of state, it might as well be an Ivy League school. That's the reality. And why? Because they can. Because they can. Because private industry has gone in and said, you can get so much more from these kids now because they don't have to actually, the parents don't have to actually pay it. Instead of charging them $600 for a year of UT Law School, you can charge them $10,000 for a year of UT Law School, and they can take out a loan to pay for their tuition. And don't you worry, we'll collect that loan and that interest for the next 20-something years. We'll take care of that for you. I think you probably, this is an astute room, you're probably aware that college loan debt surpassed credit card debt as the largest debt being serviced in this country right now. Student loan debt. So you go to college for 4 years or get a graduate degree, you're in 6 years, or a doctorate or whatever, and you're $100 grand in the hole. You have to take a job you don't want. I say to young people, don't you care how this system affects you? My daughter's 9 years old, and I'm 52. I hope I'm going to be around for a while for her after college years, but I don't want her to have to go to school, get out of college, and have to take a job she doesn't love. I don't want her to have to do anything she doesn't love because she has to pay her loan off day one out of school. Your own interests are being protected by your participation in this system. AARP, love them or leave them. I personally hate them because I'm 52 and they've already sent me stuff every year since actually since 2009. But AARP is successful as a lobbying entity because they've got a lot of people together saying, we want this or we want that. Franklin Roosevelt, during the attempt at the passage of the New Deal programs in the 1930s, would sit in meetings with people telling him all about the plight of their constituents and their friends and colleagues. And Roosevelt said to them what our president is now pretty regularly saying to us. All right, go on out and make me do it. We have to make it possible for Barack Obama to do the things we want him to do. We have to make him do it. That's our job. You didn't do your job when you cast your vote on November 6, 2012. Your job started the day after, because if we don't make them do what we want them to do, they have no pressure to satisfy your needs. They won't. Politicians are like cops. They're not interested in justice. They're interested in quiet. They don't want to be bothered. I'm serious. That's what cracks me up about the notion that government is this evil, conniving, manipulative, twisting its mustache, snidely whiplash, evil thing. Government is not reactive. It's not proactive. It's reactive. Government does what people force it to do. Government does what the Koch brothers forced them to do. Government does what the American Legislative Exchange Council forces them to do. Government does what Americans for Prosperity force, or People for the American Way, left or right, rich or poor, government does what we make them do.
I have a question. A couple of questions. One, relevant to what you were just talking about, the college student loan costs. What can we do immediately to bring those costs back into a line? That's one question.
Okay.
I'm going to let you answer it before I ask the next one.
Okay. Okay. What we're going to do, what we can do about college loan costs is actually have a realistic assessment of the true costs of providing a college education and have some oversight of the boards of regents that do that. A lot of times in most states that I'm aware of, and please someone who, because I don't know this for sure, correct me if you think I'm wrong, but most states and state institutions, boards of regents, have no direct public oversight. They're appointed by governors to sit on the boards and decide what costs and expenditures and increases all occur. I remember the last year, I think it was, the flap over the cost of Texas A&M and the Board of Regents. There was a shake-up in that board and how Governor Perry was going to appoint a replacement who would do what he wanted on that board, because Perry's an A&M alum. But again, the point is that there isn't sufficient oversight or public scrutiny of the true costs of providing a college education. I was talking to Dr. Kerry Israel from Collin College about this probably a year and a half ago, and unfortunately the course that most of them are taking to try and keep costs down is to bring in corporate entities to provide some services. Now, I don't want to sound conspiratorial, but I don't want corporations on my college campus directing curricula. I want the curriculum of my kids to be based on their wishes to discover new things, on their curiosity, on their loves and desires. Not, hey, United Technologies is over there, you can get your education here and get a job right in there. I want college to be a wondrous experience for my kid. So.
Second question has to do with what we as citizens here locally can do to bring Democratic candidates into the election. Like someone was saying earlier, so many of the Republicans are running unopposed.
Yeah.
Who does the recruiting for the candidates? Do we have a committee who does that? And
Actually,
who are they and what are they doing?
The Texas House Democratic Campaign Committee is executive director is Cliff Walker, and he's a good friend of mine, and I love him to pieces. They did a lot for me. Not really financially, but that's because they didn't have a lot of money. Like I said, there wasn't a lot of money to do it. How do you get good candidates? I want Susie Hess' name to be on the ballot so I can vote for her someday.
Good luck.
I'll tell you the truth, I ran for the legislature because I went to speak to this group, and a group of friends of mine from the group said, this was the seat that was held by Carol Kent. Carol Kent was beaten by Stephanie Carter, and they said, we need to run somebody against Stephanie. We're having trouble recruiting. Would you consider doing it? I talked to my wife about it. I talked to my little girl about it. I knew I was going to lose my job on Inside Texas Politics. I knew I was probably going to lose the radio station that I was trying to build because I wouldn't have the time to keep on doing it. I did end up losing both of those things. It has been a financial hardship. You need people, unfortunately, because of the way this system is set up, you need people who are either independently wealthy or have a work schedule that allows them to take a lot of time to travel back and forth from Austin. Might be an ideal job for drug dealers if you think about it. That's a job that affords that kind of latitude. But, that and lawyers, and the problem with the lawyers is you got to get them back in their coffins before the sun comes up. So, unfortunately, where do we get candidates for office? It's hard. Tom's had his name on the ballot for Congress, and God bless him for doing it because it's a principled decision. I don't know if I'll ever do it again. I don't know if I can afford to ever do it again. I'm a working class guy. And it was a hardship to take a year out of my life to go out and campaign every day and try and tell people, it matters that they had $5 billion and they didn't use it to fund our schools. That matters. But a lot of times, what people end up caring about is very different from what you care about. I didn't like having to be phony sometimes. When I thought somebody was crazy, I wanted to tell them I thought they were crazy. They discourage you from doing that when you're running for office, by the way. Best not to, give them a balloon and they'll go away. But it's hard to be genuine and be yourself and really care about what you're doing, and not. It seemed like every day I'd have some campaign advisor or another say, "Did you tell somebody the joke about if they're all lepers, vote for the one with the most fingers?" Yeah, I did. My dad told me that. You can't say that. You're offending lepers. And said, if I get any mail from a leper, I'll stop telling the joke. I haven't gotten any yet, so. Yes, of course, it is. And I have, it's a joke my dad told me. So if you don't like it, I'm going to keep telling it.
I do have a question, and shameless of you to even mention my name and concerned with running for anything because I run from it. I enjoy helping good people like you who are willing to step forward and get you elected if I can. And I would welcome the opportunity for that to happen again if possible.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Susie, this is the thing.
It does take money. It takes money. And unfortunately, because we are, not everyone in this room is a Democrat, okay?
Yeah, no.
You have a friendly crowd here tonight, and that's because some people stayed away, honestly.
Yeah.
But that's all right with me, although it does get pretty lively. Democrats are working class people who stand up for working class values. Union. Look at the decimation of the unions. Look at what has happened to the average wage that has just frozen. And people like me, I make a fairly good income, but the instant that I'd raise my hand to say I'd like to run for something, I would get terminated at work.
Yeah.
So I really do have a question here, and the question is this, and something that I heard on NPR radio. Yes, I listened to that liberal NPR radio, but
it's
I know
just
it's
by way of full disclosure, NPR, WRR, The Ticket, and pretty much everything else can go off the radio. I don't need it.
Okay, well, anyway.
Although Mesquite Public Schools at 88.5, the best oldies in town on the radio.
Yeah, there you go.
Mesquite Public Schools radio at 88.5.
Okay, so here's my question. What I heard was a report that most high schools no longer even publish student papers. And Scott Simon, I think, was telling us that, how do you train people to have journalistic integrity if there is no feeding ground for reporting? Everybody here can pick up a phone. I've already seen a couple of people in this room comment on my photo of you, or saying that, hey, we were here tonight. Everybody's a little reporter.
Yeah.
And I don't know the history behind why Ronald Reagan and his administration in California decided to change the policy of free education, or free college education for anybody who wanted to go there. I don't know that history.
Yeah.
I try to understand.
Well, the history of it for Reagan was nothing should be free. It has a value and you should have to pay for everything.
Right, and he also invented the welfare queen, supposedly up in Chicago, right? He invented, okay, well, anyway, I could be getting that wrong. But
although he did say that 90% of air pollution comes from plants and trees.
Yeah, well, that's because you have to understand and believe in science to. Anyway, so my question really is, how do we get people to be journalists, to
Yeah.
report the facts, to deal with the truth as opposed to this public spin.
Can I tell you, and I hope this isn't shocking to anybody here, the simple, boots on the ground reality of it today is that verifiable journalism is dead. Dead. The day Matt Drudge was considered an actual source for any news story, journalism was, and I don't use that example flippantly. Drudge Report, Huffington Post when it started. It was a stringer, but they had their own kind of, they would break their own stories. A great example is during the Boston Marathon bombing story. John King from CNN reported the day after, I believe it was the day after, that they had the bombing suspects in custody. I can tell you this now because I've been given freedom to do so by my brother who told it to me and by the chief of police, Ed Davis of Boston, who is literally a 40-year friend of mine. I knew him when he was a security guard at a hospital in my hometown. I called my brother when I saw the John King story. I said, and he's a Boston SWAT officer. I said, do they have these guys? Because CNN's saying suspects in custody. Fox is saying suspects in custody. Reuters is saying suspects in custody, etc., etc. MSNBC and NBC News, Brian Williams, managing director of the news, Brian Williams said, we cannot confirm that they have these guys in custody. We're not going to say it. They were the only one of the majors who did not say it. John King put his reputation on the line with his source. His source told him that they were in custody in Boston. My brother was at the Boston police headquarters, the only place they would have taken this high profile a suspect, where Homeland Security, the FBI, Justice Department, all those guys were all set up there. My brother said to me on the phone that day, if they got somebody in custody of that magnitude here, you wouldn't know it because there's no activity in the building. There's no heightened security. As a SWAT officer, he would have been one of the people set up to either guard the principals or the perimeter. That's what he told me. So that building would have been his responsibility if those suspects were in there. I went on the radio with my friend Pugs. A lot of you might remember Pugs, the Pugs and Kelly show? No? On 105.3 anyway. I went on Pugs' show and said, no, they don't have these guys in custody. They just don't have them. But John King, is his reputation on the line? John King went on and made a declaration with one source. I was a political journalism student, major in college. That is violation of Law 1 engraved in the tablet. Thou shalt have two corresponding sources. John King, a legitimate bona fide newsman, got that wrong. And why did they all get it wrong? Because it's more important now to be first than to be right. That's all. Where has journalism gone? There's still a lot of real good journalism out there. But unfortunately, it's part of the white noise that is also affected by the non-journalism that's out there. It's a shame. Yes, sir. Bill Moyers is genius. But Bill Moyers wasn't actually a journalist. He was an aide to LBJ in the Johnson White House, and went into news after that. Kind of like Tim Russert, who was a lawyer who wasn't a journalist, but he was fun and combative. And somebody at NBC said, "You know, you'd be good on Meet the Press," and he was. So I love a lot of journalists come from a lot of different places. I love Bill Moyers. He's a genius. He's a genius. I promised Tom I wouldn't go an hour. I'm pretty sure I've gone an hour, haven't I? I don't want to. Oh, okay. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I think that down ballot races are far underrated. What do you suggest regarding getting turnout for those, because they really impact our daily lives and our votes really do count?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Down ballot races are always affected by the quality or the contentiousness of the races at the top of the ballot. In 2014, I imagine the governor's race will have a lot of impact on who shows up to vote for the legislative races. I don't know about you guys. I don't know who are fans or not fans of the straight party balloting. Historically, the fans of straight party balloting are the ones that benefit from it, and the opponents of it are the ones who do not. Pretty well documented that Dallas County Democrats have been the beneficiaries of straight party voting, and I did a little bit of homework, and a lot of the same people who love it to pieces now hated it when Dallas County was red. So, so it's a double-edged sword. But down ballot races, Susie hit on it very well. It comes down to money. It's all a matter of how much you can raise. As a first-time candidate, and I was 51 years old when I ran for the legislature. First office I ever sought, and I only sought it because I really felt a civic responsibility to do so, because no one was going to run against the incumbent in my district. And she voted to slash public education spending. I get a kid in public school. So the first question Lon Burnham, who was the state representative from Fort Worth and one of the co-chairs of the House Democratic Campaign Committee said was, we sat down and he said, okay, can you raise $500,000? There's no evidence that I can, Lon. Based on prior abilities, I would say no. Okay, well, we're going to get you a fundraiser and all this stuff. And I worked really hard. I can tell you that this is an honest assessment. I would say 75% of my time working on my campaign, 75% of my time running for office was on the phone begging people for money. So I'm not qualified to be a state representative, but I am qualified to be a telemarketer or an Amway salesman. So,
do you think that if we took the money out of politics and we had public funds where each candidate got equal funds like they do in Britain, that we would have better elections, better candidates, better country?
I would say yes, but I would add a wrinkle to that. I don't want to have specifically publicly funded elections. I want to release the public airways, radio and television, to the candidates. Public airways is, by the way, FCC licenses, every one of them that was issued, contains a mandate to provide public interest programming in their broadcast day. Somebody realized, hey, these candidates have money, they'll spend a lot on commercials, let's charge them an arm and a leg to do commercials. Why wouldn't it make sense for Congress to say, you know what, you have your FCC license, you must provide these forums for candidates. You must. Not canned advertising. If they want to buy advertising, then let them buy advertising. But if you had free and clear access to the airways to get your message out, I would tell you there would be a lot of upset victories in a lot of races, because the problem with a lot of people running for offices, you never get to hear them or see them because they can't afford to get their message out to you. Okay. Paul Sadler did have that. I love, by the way, and this is just purely personal, I love Paul Sadler. He's a gentleman. He's a brilliant guy. He's a wonderful Christian. His politics is based on caring about his neighbor. He is a wonderful advocate of public education and stalwart defender of it. And it was a travesty to me, the way he was treated. I would tell you that, well, you have the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, but they have to look at 50 states and say, can I give money to? I'm much more, and I'll say this, I don't know who in here has a lot of money, but I'll tell you that the people that really angered me, and I'm serious when I say this, angered me in the process of my year running for office were the affluent people who did nothing to help the races in their backyard, but gave thousands upon thousands to national candidates so they could get in pictures in tuxedos with them. They weren't doing anything to help their own community, but they were, you know, celebrity lovers. So, I'm sorry, I've taken up a lot of time. Are we good? I hope that's... Thank you all so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, now it's your turn to talk. So, who wants to be first? Erica?
First, I want to thank Rich Hancock, and he doesn't know this, even though I've met him and talked to him, and we're really good friends. He used to do the Rational Radio every morning between, 7 and 9? Was it 7 to 10? And then our speaker, Amy, that was here a couple weeks ago talking about women's rights. So I used to listen to Rich before she came with Jack Bishop every morning when I was getting ready for work, and going to work, and I used to think, this guy is so smart. Every morning, 5 days a week, I would listen to you speak, and I think, he's so smart. I wish I could just know part of what Rich knows. And I think that 80% of what I do now is because of your influence. Or maybe 90, maybe 20, no. I mean, but a great deal of it. And I want to thank... Well, you know how when you meet somebody and they're really incredible, you go like, oh, I want to know about movies. I want to know about... And I wanted to know more. So I started reading and wanted to get more involved, even though I've always been a Democrat. I think one of the things that I find most important and what the lack of interest in education, and I know it takes a lot of work to be educated on candidates, and I've become not only a proponent of the national elections but also local elections, and realize that it is all local, and it's getting smaller and smaller, and I'm getting more and more local oriented. I do early vote. I work early vote as a clerk, and I see a lot of people come in, and clearly I'm proud that they're coming in to vote, but they don't know who the candidates are, and they don't know who to vote for. I had a little old couple. One of the things they were taught is never to have a husband and a wife stand together, because he'll finish real quick, and then he'll come and tell her what to do. So there was it's not so funny when you see it, because they always do this. And so we have to see, well, you have to separate them. So there was a little old couple, and he finished voting, and he came over and started voting for her. Well, I take this thing real seriously. So I came up to him and said, sir, you have to go outside, you can't help her vote. And he said, how would she know what to vote for? And that's true, and he was going to help her vote. And so I said, no, you can't. And he got really kind of agitated with me. I was real nice to him, like I'm always nice to people. But she had gone to vote and had no idea, and she was going to get him to help. So then he said, I don't understand. So then it made such a ruckus that the judge came over, and he said to the judge, this woman won't let me stand next to my wife and tell her how to vote. And he said, you know, I don't really have time to learn all this stuff. He said, so why don't you put next to each of these candidates, whether they're, I guess it was the primary, maybe it was election, and he said, why don't you put whether they're liberal, conservative, Tea Party, or whatever, and we can just vote for, you know, all these people. And he said, well, I said, I can help your wife vote. He goes, what are you? What party are you? And I said, it doesn't matter. I'm sworn to help your wife, you know, to show her how to do it. And I said, and you can just close down the whole ballot and leave, and then you can get all the education you want. But he I found so many people aren't educated. You know, I'm a real proponent of the Dallas Democratic Party, and to be real respectful, there is a Republican Party headquarters someplace in Dallas, I know, but they have a calendar. I wouldn't even try to be funny. That's the way I think. And then there's calendars. Like I've met almost everybody, and I keep meeting them, and I keep running into them. I can tell you this guy. Does anybody know who Rob Canis is? Canis, the judge? Is it Rob Canis? Oh my God, this guy is amazing. He's a judge. He is from family court. He's family violence. He is being endorsed by Family Place. You know, you can go on their sites. I would encourage not just us, but to branch out and tell our friends and get our friends involved. And knowing that we have an amazing judge out there. We have a bunch of them. Elizabeth Crowder. We have some incredible judges down the courthouse. That we don't need some crappy person that, you know, says I'm a Republican or a Democrat. So I kind of wanted to just say that also. I don't know if you know this, but I'm with Battleground Texas also, and I'm with y'all know I'm with everything. But the Republican Party has started Battlefield Texas, not Battleground, but Republicans have Battlefield Texas, and one of the people that's a leader of the Dallas Battlefield, he said our job is to keep minorities from voting last week. And so, I mean, he came right out of it. So I think that we need to be aware of that. I think we are the party that wants everybody to get out and vote. And let's see. So, and also, if you want to know the difference between the parties, I think my friends that say, I'm not going to vote either way because both parties are the same. They're not the same, and I think I've mentioned it before. The Democratic platform and the Republican platform are about as day and night as there are. So if you want to vote for a platform, you might look at what the Republicans stand for and the Democrats stand for. And if you want corruption, don't vote for the corrupt guy just because he's, you know, the right person. So I guess that's all I wanted to say. But I would suggest Kim is a wonderful, if you want to be a Democrat or if you want information, the Dallas Democratic Party has a wonderful website. You can always call me if you want to do a phone bank or something, and I'd be happy to help you. But we have all sorts of help and all sorts of education, and there's all sorts of stuff. And I would encourage, you know, on the smallest level, I mean on the lowest level, we get representatives, and we get state people in, and we get people like you in, and then you can go to the next step, and before you're finished, you're in United States Congress. I mean, how are you going to get good guys if you don't start them? And how are you going to get good guys unless you give them your money or your time or your walking? I think that's all I wanted to say. Thank you so much for tonight.
Okay, who's next? Hey, Susie. Susie Hess.
I so much appreciated you being here, and I tried to get as many of my friends to come too, but many friends are here. Let's just say that. Again, it is an honor to work with somebody like Rich to try to get him elected. And how many of you in this room have ever walked, canvassed, or made phone calls for a candidate? Wow. Okay, licked envelopes, did something for a candidate. How many of you are already deputy voter registrars? Okay. Right. Somebody asked a question earlier that I'd like to respond. And it was, how do you get people motivated to vote? We have a wonderful person. She works with the League of Women Voters, Elizabeth Wally. She lives in Mesquite, and she was involved in, she worked for the city of Grand Prairie as a professional accountant. And she understands why the cracking of a district, such as has recently happened in Mesquite, but has been the bane of Grand Prairie, why that dilutes your ability to get funding and get action in a city, right? She spoke up at the redistricting hearing this past Thursday night about that. And so when we look for people who understand what's going on, I look to people like Rich, I look to people like Elizabeth Wally, people who've been there, done that, who've had the jobs where they're trying to get things accomplished for their city, for their community, right? Elizabeth is now retired, and so she gets to do politically whatever she wants to do, and I think today she was probably out there registering people to vote. Spanish classes. And the nuns on the bus. Okay, great. All right. Anyway, she's got a little program called GOTV, which many of us know stands for Get Out the Vote. GOTV, which is part of the mission, or it should be, of anybody who's interested in making sure that we have respectable elections. Okay? So GOTV, one of her first little training classes is so basic, and it explains the fact that you have many different levels of government. When people who are at a festival walk by the booth where we're registering people to vote, they say, "Oh no, I can't, I can't get involved in the president. I don't like that." I'm like, wait a minute, come back and talk to me for a second. Do you care about the streets that you drive on? Are there potholes on your street? Do you care about whether your kids can walk to and from school, or maybe your sister or your brother, depending on how old the person is? Do you care about whether it's a school that's safe in your neighborhood? Do you care about whether the fire department and the police department are adequately funded to do the right job so that you don't end up with a bunch of crooks as police officers? Again, you kind of have to tailor the message, right? Most people will stop and listen when you put it in terms of local issues, especially if they're old enough to drive, and they're driving on some potholey street. Okay? Seriously. And the GOTV program that she does is nonpartisan. It can be done in either English or Spanish. She's got it set up with a PowerPoint slide presentation. How many of you in this room have a venue, like a church or a civic place, someplace that you can think of where we could have this GOTV put on? Again, remember, it's nonpartisan. It's not designed to go out and hook people in to vote for, I don't know, Hillary Clinton or whatever. It's designed to educate people of all ages at a very basic level. This is what civic engagement is. This is what city, state, county, and federal government is responsible for. Do any of you have, I just want you to think about this, do you have a place where we could hold this? Are you willing to talk to your contacts to see if we can get more of this voter education done? Because it's so apparent to me, if people have that little bit of knowledge, they will start going forward. They will move forward. I'm at 5 minutes. I'm going to stop here pretty quickly, but I just want to wrap it up by saying, I think as elders, I've earned these gray hairs, it's our responsibility to help encourage and not shame the younger people into voting. If they're willing to get on their phone and text Dancing with the Stars and vote, it's really not that much harder, and it's so very, very much more important. So I hope you'll think about that. Thank you very much.
Okay, who's next? Abby next. Are we running out of speakers? I can't believe this. Are you next? Yeah.
Thanks. I wanted to, I appreciated the last speaker's comments about local elections and that their importance is cannot be underestimated, and a lot of the decisions that make our lot that affect our day-to-day lives are not made by the president. They're made by city council, county commission, state legislators. These really are very important, and they often are decided by 500 votes or something like that, and so one's vote really does count. For instance, I haven't been here, I've only been here 7 months after a long absence, and I registered to vote just in time for city council, and I think my vote counted because the candidate won. And I'll only touch on this very briefly, but it is a national, even global issue. A lot of the left seems to be really fragmented, while a lot of the right tends to be very much in lockstep. And I can name off the top of my head probably a dozen left political parties and other related entities, and I just wish a lot of this infighting would stop. It's really hurting us, and it's not a Dallas problem. It's a worldwide problem, and I won't bore you with what the problems are in Memphis because I'm not there anymore, and we're not there, but just try not to have so much infighting.
Okay, who's next? Gotta be next. Am I the last man standing? No one else wants to say anything? Okay, come on.
I generally say a few words. I think the most interesting thing I heard tonight was about education and the young people. I think that obviously the future of any country is bound up with how the young people are doing. And really, I have to say that the young people of this country have been given a very bad deal, very bad deal. The fact that some of them actually now have to engage in internships, that's to say they have to pay to work, to me is astounding. You know, how can you arrive at a situation like that? I think that with respect to the Democratic Party, I think they have to sharpen up their message. I really do. Because you can, what I detect among, and I speak to a lot of people when I go about, there is, I think there is a growing awareness amongst the young people about the old truths are not accepted much anymore. They really have lost faith with their, people of my generation who have, they regard really they've let the country down, and I think they were looking for a change. My own view, we needed a FDR and we got Obama, and I think that's the simple fact of it. So I do think, reiterating that we should, it's the young people that we've let down, and they need jobs, and that's the key thing. And also, the thing I read over and over again is we must bring back jobs to this country. You can't just keep exporting jobs, and that's what's happened. And it's the Koch brothers and the rest of the gang that are doing it and benefiting by it. And I think it's the young people that are suffering, and that's why the taxes are not being paid. We can't afford to do this, and we can't afford to do that, but apparently we can afford to have 20 million people unemployed. Here you have this resource that's not being used. I just don't understand why the Democrats don't sharpen up their message on these fronts. I mean, it's obvious to most people when I talk to them what's wrong, yet I don't hear this message coming out of the White House. What's their paralysis? I just don't understand it. And I would get the message to the top, look guys, you know, you have not, I don't know what you stand for, but you certainly don't seem to be standing for the country. You know, are you standing for the rich elite that's selling the country out? Certainly I could talk about England, the country has been sold out. You know, every day another corporation is taken over in England and part of the tax base disappears. No wonder there's no taxes being collected in England. The same thing is happening here. You know, AMC Cinema is owned by the Chinese. Smithfield Pork Place owned by the Chinese. You know, this is going on and on and on now. You know, and apparently everyone's sitting back saying, well, that's fine. You know, where's my Bud Light? And you know, is my team winning? Well, goodness me. Now, look, to be effective, the Democrats have got to sharpen up their image, sharpen up their message.
Okay, who's next? Come on up here. I forgot your name. Kim Morris.
Just real quick, I am part of the Democratic Party. I work for the Democratic Party. I'm employed, and you know, remember we're only a couple hundred years old, so give us a break. And we're getting there. Yeah, sorry, you had years, you still screw it up. You know, what can I say? You know, so you know. You were saying, what should we do? And you were saying, what are we going to do about candidates and things like that? Number one is you call people on their crap. If they say Obama is wrong, you say, no, he's not. And this is the reason. Because there are talking points on Fox News that are just simplistic things. And it pervades this country. And you're right, sir. We don't have the message. The message in Dallas County right now is that the Democrats have a moral compass. That's our theme, and that's what we're going to go forward with. We have a moral compass. They do not. Anybody who accepts the fact that children go hungry in this country because you want to give Monsanto and you want to give the likes of oil companies benefits, but you can have children go hungry in this country, there is no moral compass with that. So and you make sure that you say it to people. And to step back and be afraid is wrong on our part. And you have to keep saying it over and over and over again that you're a Democrat and you're right and you have a moral compass. So then you will step forward. People are saying to me they don't want to put political signs out in their yards. I said, why not? You know, why aren't you proud of what you are? You know, the Republicans are doing this. They're saying this all the time. I'm proud of being an idiot. So you have to come forward and say that you stand for something, because the message is we have a moral compass, and we have to keep saying it over and over and over again. Now, I'm going to visit with you in a couple weeks, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what the party's doing and what some of our plans are. But I have to tell you, the reason Battleground Texas is here is because the party failed. It did. Democratic Party we missed the boat in Texas. Battleground Texas is being put together by a bunch of people from my hometown in Chicago area. So it's, we missed the boat, and it actually kind of ticks me off working for the party that they're here. I really don't like it. But they have good ideas. They have some strategic planning going on, and we're going to partner with them, and that's what we have to do. And that's what we're going to do. And that's the only way we're going to change the state. So I thank you for allowing me to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And Rich, thank you for asking me to come. So it's good to be here with you all.
Okay, who's next? Have we got it next? Are we running out of people? Am I the last man standing? I guess I am. Anyway, I want to thank our speaker for being here tonight. I think he did a great job. Bring us all together. One of the things he brought up that I really have something to say about is he brought up the fact that we need free airtime. And that, since, just a little piece of history, in 1994 I ran for Congress. I took on over $100,000 in contributions, mostly from unions, and took 38% in the election. In 2002 I ran against the same guy again. At that time, they all went to Gephardt in Washington. They said, where should we send the money? He said, send to the open races and send to the incumbents. Don't send anything to any challengers. It's been that way ever since. That's why challengers can't win anywhere, because they don't get any money to run for an election. And the end result is that you get the best Congress money can buy. That's what's happened. And so we got Congress, and it filters all the way down. We got the best Congress money can buy. And it's really sad. And one way to break that dam is to get Congress to, you've got to get Congress to act to represent the people that elect them instead of representing the people that are buying their vote in Congress. That's what we have to do. Now, at the present time, the corporations, you want to know why Congress is so divided on everything? It's because the corporations have all the money. They're paying the congressmen to be congressmen and to represent the corporations. That's what's happened. And there's nothing to combat that. And the end result is that if someone speaks out and votes against those corporations, they don't get any money in the next election, they're out. That's the way it's been. So, in my view, if we get Congress, which is what I ran on before and didn't get too far with it, was that we get Congress to act in its own self-interest, to instruct the Federal Communications Commission to require the media to provide sufficient free airtime for federal candidates in general elections, the last 90 days of an election. Then you'd change everything. You'd have people representing the people that elected them, as opposed to representing the people that are buying their vote in Congress. You'd have overturning of elections. You'd end up with people that ran against an incumbent might win. And the incumbents won't know the difference because they're too used to everything being the way it is. They'll vote for it. And that's what I think needs to be done. That's the big issue. Because absent of that, you can't get anything done. You can't get a shorter workday in this country. Put the nation back to work. You got 25 million people out of work. That's what has to happen. Nobody's going to do it because the corporations don't want it. They're foolish because the very people that are going to keep their corporations going are starving. And if they don't have the money, they're not going to do it. It's crazy. That's what we're into. So we've got to change that. And I really appreciate your being here tonight. You did a great job. And now you get to close this thing and comment on the comments and close the meeting. You get the last word.
Thank you all so much for coming out tonight, and a lot of good friends here. I'm very grateful. I'm grateful to Tom, and I'm so glad that the College of Complexes is here, because we can build from this group tonight to larger groups. The fact is, we've got so much access now to electronic community. And you hear people rail against things like Facebook and Twitter and Tumblr and social networks because it is impersonal. But the fact is, those are avenues to contact. We all get contact from groups on Facebook, reach out to us because we're a Democrat or we're a Republican or we're this or that. The fact is, when the Arab Spring occurred all over the Middle East last year, in Yemen and Tunisia and Egypt, etc., I was so struck by one particular photo that a photojournalist took in Tunisia of a white clay wall with the words spray painted, "Thank you, Facebook." Because that was the only way they could communicate. When state-run media shut down all the media so the word couldn't get out to those people who were rising up against these 40-year-old dictatorships all over the region, social media was still accessible for them to communicate. We can use those things, and that's something that the President and Organizing for America and Battleground Texas, Jen Brown and Jeremy Byrd, are utilizing now to help bring a Democratic majority to this state. These means by which to get together, you know, it starts there on your computer in your home, and it leads to the Mecca restaurant. And we're all here for different reasons. I want to tell you that I am so grateful to all of you for coming out tonight, and I thank you. I hope we can do this again real soon. Thank you so much.
Well, we're through speaking here tonight, and our speaker's here, so carry on.
This is William, your videographer from the KNO website. This is a trial video, and if you like it, please let us know in the comments below, or like us, or follow us, and we will find some more.